education path, professional education path is. So, kind of fun one. But Ruthi wanted to kick it off.
Yeah.
All right, we'll buy you more time, Dave. So we've got a lot of competing priorities. I find myself having a lot of competing priorities. I've got a full-time job. We've got this fantastic podcast. I've got a couple of side web projects. I have family, friends, and, top of that list, children, husband. There's a lot going on. And sometimes it's hard to balance. And I also know that there's a ton of technologies out there that I have perhaps not taken advantage of to help solve some of the, time constraint problems that we've got. So I wanted to get a sense from you guys of how do you optimize your workflows to be as efficient as possible? And or how do you think about prioritizing your time to make the most space for what's most important?
So you have hit upon one of my favorite pet topics. I've spent the better part of 12 years figuring out what works for me. I should have written down the questions that you had because now I've completely blanked on them. But that's one of the unfortunate side effects of having too many things going on is, at least for me, I find my short-term memory goes to junk. So in order to combat that, I've been playing around with, agile methodology, having my own like sprint boards, all my own Post-its of all the things that I should do. Before my son was born, I was even having, I went so far, this is how nerdy I am. I went so far as to figure out during the workday, I can accomplish X number of sprint points per week. During my at-home time, I have Y number of sprint points per week, which need to account for housing projects, creative projects, all these other things. And I had completely forgotten I did that until recently. I cleaned out a section of my office and I found the notebook that actually had the physical map that I had taped on the wall. I'd actually graphed it out. I went full nerd on this. And then, of course, my son's born and I just didn't have time for that. In order to capture a lot of that other thing, a lot of the other things that I want to do, I have been, I moved digital. So using things like Trello, Todoist, Asana, Monday.com, trying any and all of these project management softwares, for myself, just to keep track of ideas and things I'm interested in pursuing and things I want to, look after. But then part of it too is figuring out the buckets of time in any given day and where my energy is at any particular spot. There are particular times of day where I am better to be creative, or, there's a hour, 2 hour spot in the afternoon where I just don't have a lot of energy mentally, physically. So you know what? I'm not going to try to push through that. I'm just going to acknowledge that that's a downtime during the day and leverage that to relax a little bit, meditate, or, take the dog on a walk. So I've thrown a lot of stuff at you. What rings true with what you were hoping to talk about?
All of it. I think, some of the things you talked about are having a good sense of what's possible during a given workday versus, we'll call it the off hours, is important because you've got only so much time. Timeboxing is such a huge tool for being able to say, nope, we're not doing everything or anything. And we got to keep the things that we do to a limited amount of time. We don't have a limitless amount of time. And so I think having a good sense of this is what's feasible helps combat a problem I often have, which is, boy, I take on a lot and I like to say yes to things, which, I recognize that's probably the first place to start is don't say yes to everything. And part of what makes that possible to say no is having a realistic understanding of what's possible in a given day. And then I think the off hours piece too is good to have, to just clearly articulate, here's what's feasible in the off hours. I mean, off work hours, right? And, I know the times that I have dedicated to the family, and those are just off limits, right? We've got that in place. It's just a question of the rest of the time, how can I make best use of that? And to your point, the creative time is usually in the morning. And it's like, gosh, how do I carve out space so that my creative time isn't being hijacked by the fire drills of the day? So
the thing that I've done, and I did this due to the pandemic when that first hit, I blocked off chunks of time on my calendar for specific activities. So at the very end of the day, you will see a block on my calendar, my work calendar, that says health time. And that is either physical health or mental health, because some days you just have some days and you just need to stare at a wall and come down, right? Like that for me is super important because it allows me to transition into dad mode, because I want to be present and active, and whatever happened during my workday is not my kid's fault. Right. So I don't want to bring that baggage to him, and I'm in a fortunate enough place that I can do that. I recognize that that's a privilege and a nice to have to be able to do that. But that's been an important part for me, is not letting everybody else dictate my calendar, but actually blocking off, like, if you're going to invite me to a meeting over lunch, you are going to be okay with me eating on camera. If you don't want me eating on camera, don't schedule a lunch, or if it's in person, you're providing lunch. And if you don't want to do that, then you're scheduling it at a different time. So I don't get invited to lunch meetings.
It's pretty funny. I guess I have a block during lunch always on my calendar. So people have to ask, they generally ask, like, hey, can you move your 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock or whatever it is? And it's like, maybe not most of the time. Mm-hmm. I'll shift it around within, half hour or something like that. But beyond that, it's like, no, I've got an appointment then. So you can move it. Just to try to protect those times. That was one of the main things. I recently started a new job that I kind of put on my Kanban. Same thing, do Kanbans as well. And I mean, we got a whole list of them. How to protect myself, my rules, cell phone, etc. Like, I don't have work email on my cell phone. It was recommended when I first started. Still, I don't do it. Same thing with Slack. I don't have that on my phone. I just refuse it. I've seen so many people get sucked into their phones because it's so easy to. I mean, it's kind of doom scrolling, really, when you're just kind of flicking through your email. But you can do that at any moment where your kid turns their back. You can always flick up on your phone and, scroll through email. And yeah, I mean, just got to cut that off. Plus, most things, especially with SEO, 24-hour late notice or, reply to something wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah.
Even 48 hours probably still wouldn't really change a thing. Maybe it'd annoy someone at most, but really the projects we work on are much longer term than that. So if someone's out sick and they're not replying for a day, just as easy as you not replying for, 8 hours or 16 hours or 20 hours. Really doesn't make any difference on a project. And kind of coming to that realization, I think, is just kind of one of the core pieces. I definitely didn't have any rules in work-life balance or life-work balance, if you want to prioritize it correctly. When I started at an agency, had some friends actually do like an intervention, being like, where have you been? Like, you're just always working. And it was true, because I was working literally Monday through Saturday. I was in the office every single day, 6 days a week. Sundays I barely had off. I was right back doing it. And evenings I was spending reading and learning information, which was cool. Great way to career growth, but great way to also kill social life too. So coming with that balance, and after kind of going through that, it was enough to kind of make me prioritize that a lot higher than I used to, which is why I'm really, really protective of kind of family time and off hours, of being like, no, that's unscheduled, because you also need unscheduled time. Like to Dave's point, talking about creative, you can't schedule creative. Like, and it's not fun if it is. I mean, like, there has to be some boundaries there too, of just like scheduling every minute of the day. Humans don't work like that. I mean, you burn out getting stuck into, 10-minute, 15-minute, or 30-minute, or even hour-long, blocks throughout your entire waking hours. Hell no. No.
Well, and what's interesting about that too is I've discovered through this process that just like there's seasonality in marketing, there is seasonality into the things that I'm interested in doing. So like I have found in the fall, I start getting an impulse to write more. So I will sit down and like towards the end of the day, like make a cup of tea, sit down at the kitchen table and just do stream of conscious writing. And that is a activity that is basically fall, winter. And then in the summer and spring, I have really no inclination to do that. I don't know why, but that's just kind of a natural flow. So I just take advantage of that when it's there. Yeah.
I gotta write that down because that's totally true. I was just thinking like there definitely is seasonality. I mean, I also do kind of outdoor landscaping kind of stuff, gardening stuff. And of course that's more other activities. There definitely is some seasons that too. I gotta think about that.
May is gardening month. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a good one. I've got a giant list, Dave, of kind of similar things that I've tried. Not things I would say that I do on a regular basis. Some of them I do, some of them I don't. I don't know, it's kind of a grab bag, but I've got a pretty long grab bag. So Ruthi, do you want me to run through that, or do you want to share some of yours first?
No, I need help. Run through the grab bag.
All right. So Kanban, absolutely. I do that for home projects because it's a great way for my wife and I to talk about priorities and say, these are like our top 3 things. And then there's everything else and things that we want to talk about or whatever else. It's a Post-it, it's on a wall, but we kind of keep it there. She and I kind of go back and forth. So she's an agile trainer. So the two of us are kind of in this world pretty hard. I mean, honestly, we had a Kanban for a wedding and it was actually awesome. It worked out really well. But that's kind of how in depth, or how invaded agile is in our personal life. But she always had the idea of throwing away when you're done. And for me, no, I like to have them saved. So there's a done column that's very, very long, but honestly, that gives me probably the most satisfaction of any of these things. Because I've realized basically with any project, there's basically 4 phases. There's excitement at the beginning, might be stress and pressure or personal excitement. And then you get into it, and then there's frustration because it's annoying and it lasts longer than you expect. And then there's the relief because the project's finally over or you finally get it done. And then eventually there's this feeling of pride. And that's stage 4.
And that's 4 years later.
Yeah, it's a long time. It's a long time. No, it is. I do woodworking, and honestly, every single project, there's finally relief because I'm like, oh my gosh, the thing took so much longer than I expected. And I see all the imperfections with it. And I'm just harping and kicking myself on these imperfections. And then eventually I realized that was a cool project. I'm glad I did it. Pride is a delayed reaction. It definitely has a delay to it. Or there's the inevitable, part 2 of 3, which is just this frustration, relief. Oh, I got it done. No, there's still more. No, there's still something left on it. Sorry, 2 and 3. That's a frustrating point. Mm-hmm. But that's true of work projects and personal projects and all the rest too. So it's trying to give them, speaking of kind of a mental health, emotional side, giving them their space of being realizing that the beginning of any project is going to be exciting. And then once you get into it, there will be a slog. It doesn't matter if it's something you enjoy or not. There's a repetitive nature to it. The learning kind of curve or excitement or the initial kind of boost that you had is over. Yes. And then you have to deal with that frustration and then that relief. And then when looking at it, a project through that lens, is this thing going to be worth it to me? And is it going to actually give me, satisfaction at the end, or is it just going to be more frustration than what it's worth? And honestly, any work project or personal project, you can judge it the same way too. So I kind of look at them being like, yeah, that's going to be annoying, but I'm going to love it, and it's going to help me every day. Like, that's worth it, probably doing it. But enough on that one. I'll go through my lovely grab bag of things. Pomodoro method. Absolutely love that, especially whenever there isn't strong deadlines at work, of just trying to get myself into work, trying to get myself some kind of focus time, but also consistent breaks away to make sure that I'm not just staring at a screen, but I'm actually being productive. Way better. Plus, it gives me such a good realization of how long things actually take. It's amazing how many segments of 25 minutes something actually takes. Template as much as I can, especially anything repetitive at work. I try to simplify stuff down. If it's a monthly report, it's like 5 slides. It's the same 5 slides. I'm not doing more than that. I'm just going to update those 5 slides. And honestly, no one really ever asked for more than that. It's a surprising amount of how just basic you can make things, and they're still satisfactory, or even, meeting and exceeding someone's expectations. So you set the expectation to be 5, it's 5. Everybody's happy with it. Like, beyond that. Personal growth is huge with me. I realized that I always need something of personal growth in my life. Doesn't matter if it's trying Duolingo for like the 50th time or whatever. Mm-hmm. If I don't have that, it is really hard for me to feel happy about how my week is going. So I just know that I have to come up with that if I don't have it. I just always have to know of something to do like that. Perspective checks, especially with young kids. That one's huge, because a young infant at home is way different than a young toddler at home. And as I am kind of working through those months, what I have for life and what's possible changes radically during that time, and trying to remind myself that life 6 months from now will be very different. Life 6 months ago was very different. Trying to like come up with that perspective, because that's every project I judge again with that same lens of being like, my amount of time and what I can promise is radically changing month to month.
To that point, I think there's something to be said about ages and stages, right? You brought up, in your 20s, being all in on your career makes sense, because the investment you have there will set up what you'll be able to accomplish for the rest of it. I think it's a worthwhile investment to go a little more in on your career in your 20s, because the stage we're in now with the kids and the career, you have some career growth, but really honestly, it's more about making it through the day with young kids. Giving yourself some grace with that, and not expecting perfection in every aspect of your life. God forbid life is messy, right? That is a super hard lesson for people to learn. So if you're not there yet, focus there before trying anything else. For me at least.
The other one, journaling. That one's big for me because of remote work and COVID. My short-term memory is really, really bad. I used to when we worked in person, and I can still tell you who said what, who sat where in particular meeting rooms about particular conversations from 6 years ago, which is ridiculous, because I can't really tell you very clearly what I did last week at work. Mm-hmm. And when I start journaling, suddenly I have it back again, which is really nice. And that could be just literally a couple sentences about how I feel that day, or gratitude journaling, pick 3 things that you're grateful for. That's it. Move on. That's the end of your journaling. But I mean, it can be so many different things, but just reflecting back on the day and writing something down, I think, is where the memory kind of kicks in. And by not ever doing that, that's when I start to lose days. But it's also then harder and harder to see progress, harder to see differences. So again, that personal growth thing kind of kicks in. Trello, absolutely. There's a, I can't remember, podcast or blog I was reading, but they're talking about 5 and 10-minute tasks, saying, instead of, doing the laundry being this insurmountable multi-hour experience, it's Throw stuff in the washer, that's 5 minutes. Take things out of the washer and put in the dryer, that's 5 minutes. Taking things out of the dryer and folding them, maybe that's 30 minutes, but you can fold part now and fold half later. So taking those bigger, harder, obstacles that we have on a routine basis and then trying to chunk them up. And then realistically saying, hey, I've got 5 minutes. What can I do? You can do a lot. You can do a lot in 5 minutes. And I even have a Trello board that is simply just 10-minute tasks, which are a whole bunch of little random things that I keep thinking about, like, oh man, I got to throw that stuff in the attic, or, I got to quick move this and sweep this or something like that. It's 10 minutes, it's 5 minutes. It's not long to actually do any of those things. So those are helpful when I'm looking to do something or trying to be productive to, have a list. I literally have 2 more Post-its to go, man. I got a lot of these things.
Okay. Well, let's save it for another episode.
Yeah, right. On the things I tried.
I think you bring, to your point, you bring up some good points. The big thing for me is that the ages and stages piece, the let life be messy, which I know, depending on personality type and childhood trauma, that could be a problem for some people. But also, like, for me, when I hear you talk about like the Pomodoro method or like the 10-minute task, I start getting nervous because I can't be that detailed. I need to have a North Star that I'm going towards, knowing full well that I'll probably go off track a little bit, but then I'll snap back, towards it. And then, I'll get there eventually. Right. For me, it's not okay, I have 8 hours, so I can, estimate 6 projects in these 8 hours. I'm doing 2 or 3 projects. I know I can do probably 2 or 3 things really well each day. So what are going to be those 2 or 3 things? And only do those. Because then if I'm constantly adding things back in, I don't get the time to appreciate the fact that I've accomplished the 3 things I set out to accomplish. I don't get the downtime to reflect on that or to feel good about it. So I largely don't, So, and the other part of it is allowing yourself time to experiment, right? Like, one of the reasons I said it's been a 12-year journey is because it's a journey. You have to figure out what works for you and what, you listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff on these people of like, I have this system and this methodology and, buy my journal to do blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, cool. That works for you. That works for some people, but I have to do it. I have to figure out my way. 'Cause I'm not, like I said, I can't do 5-minute tasks. I would go insane. I have such a hard time switching between minor tasks. Like I have to sit and chunk out large bits of time because that's the only way that my brain works, is I need to go deep on something in order to get it done to the level that I'm satisfied with. I cannot do like 15-minute meetings, jump to a task, 15-minute meetings. I would go insane. And I would be a nervous wreck. So, you get a half an hour or an hour meeting with me. Full stop. I don't do these 15-minute things unless they're in the hallway. No, I can't. But that's my own mental thing. So, Ruthi, you've been sitting quiet. I'm interested in knowing where you're at. What are you doing? What have you tried?
I can't say all of the above. I've done a number of the things that you guys have listed in the past. I think the big takeaway from the discussion I've been hearing is really that ages and stages piece, which, to your point, Dave, we each have our different methods and our different systems in place. And I think I had a pretty decent system in place, but enter new kid 2, right? And that shakes the whole world. And all of a sudden my like nice 5 to 7 minute morning sort of thoughtful reflection on the day goes out the window because she's up earlier than the other one. And so then now we have to adapt and think about it and overcome. And so I think a lot of what I am feeling right now is just that those shifts have happened, and I haven't taken the time to sit back, reflect, and realize, oh, there's been some major shifts which have disrupted majorly a lot of the systems I had in place before. And so this has just been helpful to think through, okay, what is it that I need to think about differently? And keep in mind, it's going to change in a month, because my schedule and my life is revolving a lot around my children, and they change month to month. I mean, it's both amazing and also hard to keep up sometimes. So that's been just really helpful to hear you guys talk about those. And man, I've got the Scrum book here on my desk, and I'm not even using a Kanban board, and I feel ashamed of myself.
So to be honest on that, I spent all of January trying to get all of my projects into a nice, neat to-do project management software. And it was great. I felt awesome. It was scheduled, and I had all of these nice things of like, I'll give myself a week to do this thing. And then I got to March and I realized I wasn't opening up any of it.
That sounds like a Gantt chart, Dave. I think you just need some Post-its.
But even with that, I think it's a good exercise, because I did that exercise because I felt like I was going in too many directions, right? So I brought everything back in to prioritize what is important to me, what I wanted to accomplish for the year. That's why it was in January. Like, this is going to be my North Star for the year. I want to accomplish these, 3 to 5 things. Warren Buffett has a method that people will quote if you want to go look that up, where it's, write 5 things or 25 things that you want to accomplish, circle 5 of them and say no to the rest, so you might look into that if you have a hard time saying no, because then it's nope, these are my 5 things. You have to do a really good pitch to convince me to do something else, or to get rid of one of my 5. I had that nice chart and that nice setup, and it's nice to have a laundry list of things that I want to do and I'm still interested in. But really, honestly, it goes back to that. What is the important thing this week that I'm accomplishing? And then I devote my week to accomplishing that, right? Yeah. In different sections of my life. So there's health, there's career, there's family, and that's about it. Maybe some fun time. I might have some video game time or some guitar time.
What?
That's it. Maybe.
I think of all the video games that you play, and I think, how did I possibly have time for all that? And then I remember that was pre-children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a sacrifice of sleep if you want to keep it up.
Okay.
Yeah, having a sleep disorder kind of helps, because then you only sleep for 5 hours a night, and you can get a lot done when everybody else is sleeping.
Stop sleeping. Okay, great. All right, Alex, what you got?
All right.
Your topic. Let's switch.
Yeah, so this was kind of an interesting one. Gotta say, it was from a random recording of a homily that someone sent me a section of. It was a really random thing I was listening to, but it was interesting. So this priest has been playing guitar for 30 years, and he is worse today than in his second year of learning guitar. And the reason he's worse is because while he's been playing for 30 years, and technically should have passed his 10,000 hours probably a while ago, he only plays a little bit on the weekends, and he only basically now plays the songs that he likes to play. He's not learning anymore. And that's the big difference. Is in his first 2 years of learning guitar, he was always doing this push the envelope practice, trying to figure out, what are the limits? What does he not know? Practicing scales, chords, you name it. And now he doesn't do any of that. He just keeps replaying the same songs that he's been playing probably for 25 years. So probably got stuck on the same ones after maybe 5-ish years, right?
And those church songs are really only like 5 chords maximum. So it's not that hard of a song.
That's all it's down to. Actually, the guy's into metal, so there's some different chords that he's probably playing that he's But it was a really interesting thought, because there's the idea again of these 10,000 hours. And it's not 10,000 hours. There's a lot of questions of whether or not that's enough or the right amount or whatever. But it's a question of, is it 10,000 hours of deliberate practice? And I'm going to mix in one other piece on top of this, which for a while there, I got into some random shows. There's a BBC show, some people trying to do job changes and like graphic designer to become a blacksmith or something. And there was all kind of trades, and all these different trades had this apprentice, journeyman, master kind of set. And for almost all of them, about 5 years. Could be a little bit more than that, but somewhere around there, which is pretty close to this whole 10,000 hours thing kind of plays in actually right around with that as well, which is kind of interesting. So 2 questions. Are you a master SEO? Could you take on an apprentice? And do you see yourself as just playing the same songs, or are you putting in deliberate practice?
So let me do the very marketing thing and answer your question with an anecdote that seems unrelated.
I love those. Continue.
So it's interesting. The topics we're discussing today are very related to the last podcast I did, where it was balancing work life, side hustles, and everything, and family life, and all of that. And in one of the episodes where we talked about this, I referenced one of my favorite YouTube channels, which is called That Pedal Show. And it's 2 British guys talking about guitar pedals and guitar effects and amps, and in such a nerdy way that only the diehards would watch it, right? And it's great. You know, it's the type of content where if you're not into it, your face would gloss over and you'd be like, why would anybody watch this? But for me, it's awesome because they're testing out all of the pedals that I wouldn't have the money to try out. And they have a particular approach that I can learn a lot from, but I would never choose the tones that they get out of their equipment. And I would never choose the guitars that they would choose because I play different styles. I want a different sound, but the concepts I can apply to my own sound, which they would never choose for themselves. Right. That I bring up that channel because one of the guys, Dan, has a video about being as good as you want to be and why he never had to be the best guitar player. Right. Because especially with guitar playing, if you go on to Instagram or you go on TikTok or any of that, you have a lot of these bedroom guitar gods that are amazing technicians. Right. But okay, cool. You can play a zillion miles an hour. Have you written a song? Have you stood on stage? Have you done the next step of trying to play with other people? Or are you just the technician? Because that's the first half of what it means to be a musician. It's not just to play. It's about being able to communicate and express yourself in the context of the moment with the other musicians, right? So if you're a solo singer-songwriter, that's great. That's its own thing, right? It has its own requirements of being able to strum and sing at the same time, and you express more through the words and the vocals than you do your technical abilities on the instrument. So it's part of it, for me at least, is it is the deliberate practice, because if you're just noodling around, you're never going to actually become a master in something, right? It'll just be the kind of generalist. But you need the deliberate practice to truly master it and to be able to express yourself within the context of whatever it is you say you want to master, because then you can differentiate yourself from everybody else that's out there doing the same thing. Yeah, I'll embed that video in the show notes. It's worth a watch, even if you're not into guitar playing. His logic for why he doesn't need to be the fastest player or the best player. He just wants to continue to explore and get better at the things he's interested in, is good enough for him. So
I think that's a really good framework for what I've been thinking about, which is Master SEO. I don't think I'm going to claim that title. I have a very strong background in SEO and a sort of a solid stockpile of information from which to draw. And I'm keeping up on sort of what's happening in the landscape overall, but perhaps not the very technical details of what's happening. Because I need to get on stage. I need to be using that knowledge and applying it in different ways. And taking on an apprentice, I can, at this point, I'd say I'd be able to take on an apprentice to get them started, get them on the right track. But then in terms of being highly knowledgeable about the very technical aspects and some of the shifts in how we do a lot of technical SEOs, I'd have to brush up a fair amount, in part because I've made the choice not to continue going down that road, but instead figure out, okay, well, how does search fit into the larger landscape? And when do we need to pull that lever versus other levers? And what are the trade-offs we need to make as we're thinking about our web and our marketing technology ecosystems?
Yeah, I had a similar thing. That's one of the reasons I thought of that pedal show video. Because for me, my experience with the technical side of things, I wanted to explore that. I wanted to learn that. But then the further I got into it, the more I realized my brain doesn't work this way. Like, up to a point, it's good, but I can't spend all my time talking about server errors and, client side loading. And I can follow that and I can make the recommendations around that if I need to. But that's not what makes me excited about doing marketing, right? That's more, for me, that's more of the dev side. We can debate where that does fit. But I remember going from a technical SEO developer meeting to the next hour, having a meeting with 2 sales guys. And my very first thought in the second meeting was, oh, I miss the bullshitters. I want to be with the bullshitters. Because there was a certain energy and a certain vibe to the sales guys that you just weren't getting in the dev world. And that's great. Everybody has their place, right? Just like the workflows and the time management, you need to figure out your own place and your own way of doing it. And I answered the questions for myself with technical SEO. And once I did, that was good enough for me, I
think where I'm finding probably the most value at this point is finding the crossovers in the knowledge that I have and applying it elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, there is a piece of it that's doing the same things, in the sense that I've got that sort of stockpile of knowledge, which does need to be refreshed on a reasonably regular basis, because technology moves. But then it's sort of more interesting on the deliberate learning side to see, okay, how does this apply to other areas? How does my knowledge about SEO apply to the advances in internal search functionality, for example, or to, I don't know, how we might use some of what we do in search and the evolving AI. Like, how do we apply that to other areas of marketing or life? What are you thinking, Alex?
Yeah, I was thinking, is there somewhere you were trying to lead us to, or
No,
where are you at with this question?
Yeah, it was just kind of the general question. I've been, since hearing about it, I've been definitely reflecting on it myself, of putting in that deliberate practice. That's the piece that I've been kind of focused around. Was, am I just going through my week, or am I trying to learn? Am I trying to really push what I do know? Am I where am I at basically with that? There is some of this, going back to their earlier topic about, where does it fit in my day? Where does it fit in my life? Am I putting the energy towards this, or am I not? And I would say at different weeks or even different months, yes and no. I mean, the answer kind of changes. But there's also these pieces that I kind of always feel like are gaps, and I'm trying to always fill that knowledge and trying to learn a little bit more. And it might be a hard topic that I just don't have a whole lot of personal interest in, but it's something that kind of the greater realm of SEO. So therefore, it's something I want to learn to kind of complete that mastery element. And those elements are always changing too. So it's hard to keep on top of those different pieces. So at what degree do you, or are there particular kind of different flavors of SEO that you focus on, content versus technical? I mean, there's a lot of different sides to it. Local search. I wasn't doing local search for quite a long time, but trying to get back into that to trying to pick up, what are the latest. And man, things changed quite a bit in the time that I used to do it. And then I used to keep on top of it because I still had some interest in it. And there was a long period of time where I didn't keep on top of it. And a lot of stuff changed during that period of time too. So there's a moving target aspect to it as well. So that's why I don't think there's ever a best, but it's more of a mastery element. And then there's that reflection of mastery that I always have, which is, can you teach it? Knowing it is one thing, or thinking you know it is one thing, but can you teach it? And with a new job, I'm definitely back into that kind of teaching mode a lot more frequently now. Mm-hmm. And it's been an interesting one to kind of reflect on of, what topics do I feel very confident about teaching? Which ones do I not? Why don't I? And what am I missing? So that's kind of where my head's at, really.
Yeah. Do you guys listen to the Scott Galloway podcast, the Prof G podcast?
No of it. Haven't heard it. No.
Okay. I've recently been getting really into it. He's a New York University professor and multi-entrepreneur guy, but he has a saying of, the worst advice people get is follow your passions. He said, no, follow where you're investing your time. Which goes back to our earlier conversation of, where are you naturally finding yourself investing your time, and go for that. Right. Because you can say I'm extremely passionate about guitar playing. That was one of my gigs, coming out of school. I went to school for, mastering the craft of guitar playing and music composition and audio engineering and all of those skills. But when it came down to it, the signs were there that I was always the business guy in the artistic projects that I was in. Right. I was the one that was interested in setting up the long-term goal of all right, we'll play these local shows. And then we have a goal of 5 years from now playing this particular festival. And here are the steps we need to do to get there. Right. That particular mindset has helped me get into marketing and has helped me be moderately successful on the business side. Right. But in reflecting on that, it really was I found myself doing more of the marketing activities and enjoying doing more of the marketing activities than learning another cover song to be able to play the bar band gig. I hate learning cover songs. And that's a major component of playing live music these days, which puts me at a massive disadvantage because I don't care if you want to hear Free Falling for the third time. I'm not going to do it. So yeah, finding where I was investing my time and tripling down on that and prioritizing that. So.
Ruthi, you got some more?
I was focusing on what Dave was saying and I completely lost the thing that I wanted to say, which is really important. And that's how we should be listening. But it's a real bummer when you're trying to answer a question on a podcast.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I
was thinking of Dave singing Free Falling and trying to imagine that as part of the outtakes. That's what I got stuck on. So if I think of what it is that I was going to respond to, I'll let you know. But I'm going to leave it at that image.
Yeah, I think we clearly in this episode, I think it's an important episode, kind of a sidestep from what we've normally talked about, but these are topics I definitely spend a lot of time thinking of and definitely enjoy talking about. And you can tell from a lot of the pauses that we're, thinking about it as well. If you have your own ideas on this, please email us. You can find our Enterprising Minds podcast at Gmail in the show descriptions on YouTube or the podcast player. So email us with your thoughts, ideas, what's worked for you, what's not. Let us know. And we will see you in the next episode after you like, subscribe, and share this current one. And see you on the flip side.
Cheers.
Yep.